Thank you for coming to this press conference. I have had several calls from members of the media on various issues. So I thought that today I should avail myself to you to clarify those issues that you've been calling me about, because I must apologize, I've been very short in the telephone interviews. And I know that there are many issues that you may wish to raise with me about recent events and to have others clarified. Before I get to that, I just want to make a few short remarks. First of all, there's been a lot of talk about my meeting with the president. And I have explained the context in which the meeting took place. I said that Mr. Harman met me in Parliament and he indicated that at some point in time the president would like to see me. And I said to him, well, why don't you let me know? And so I received a text from him, and the text said that he'd been trying to make contact with me. I saw several missed calls, so I knew he called me. And he said in the text that if Monday at 4 p.m. would be convenient to me. If that is convenient, then the meeting could take place at that point in time. So I texted him back because I didn't get him on the phone. I called him too. And I said, I asked, is there a specific agenda? I did not receive a reply, but I knew the meeting was on because the secretary called the secretary at the office, the president's secretary, and found out whether the meeting for 4 was still on. So when I showed up there, the president gave me an agenda. He welcomed me and he gave me an agenda, and I said I thought that this was just an initial meeting, a courtesy meeting. And he said to me, I wrote you a letter, and I did not receive the letter. So I said to him, I did not receive the letter. I believe they wrote the letter, but I don't know where apparently it was sent to Sparenda, but I did not receive it. Nevertheless, since I was there, we met, and there were several ministers at that meeting. There was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Attorney General, Amnali, I think Minister of Social Cohesion, Raphael Trotman, Mr. Harman himself, the Minister in the Ministry of the Presidency, and Mr. Nagamoto, the Prime Minister. They were all at the meeting, and so the President, in his opening remarks, spoke about the need to work together, and that now that the agenda is there, the agenda is just a proposal. And in my response, I said to him, I will undertake to have this discussed at the level of the party and get back in touch with him, given that I come here not to discuss a specific agenda. But having looked at the agenda, there was one of the 5 items on the agenda related to border matters. And I said to him, I did not need to consult on this issue, that the People's Progressive Party and the opposition will fully support all national efforts relating to preserving the integrity of our sovereignty or territory or borders, and that we will participate fully in any engagement in that relation, in relation to the border. Prior to that, we had discussions in Parliament. Mr. Greenidge approached me, and as a result of the discussions, Gail Teixeira had joined the government committee when they met with the United Nations. And I said to them that we, as a party, we would also meet with the UN to reiterate our full support for any efforts to preserve the integrity of our border. So that is going to happen. The government can expect full support in this regard on border matters. Where it comes to economic diplomacy, though, we may not have a similar approach, and we may have huge differences in terms of how we approach economic diplomacy. We believe that you cannot every day talk about people infiltrating the country, Indians, Chinese, Russians. You can't wage a campaign that they're raping the resources of our country and then expect to build the relations with this new world, a new economic bloc that has emerged, that although has problems in the current economic environment, I'm speaking about the BRIC countries, that they will re-emerge in the future to become probably the biggest bloc in the world. They already are the biggest bloc in terms of population. And in terms of economic dynamism, although they are in trouble, well, not in trouble, but they have had some problems recently. Take, for example, China. China's growth has slowed to 7%. But 7% may be bad for China, but Europe is still, many countries in Europe in deep recession. Japan is barely crawling out of recession. The US posts a measly, sometimes 1%, 2% growth. And so there's still a very vibrant part of the world. And therefore, our domestic rhetoric has to create the environment to reach out to that part of the world, because they're a huge source, particularly China, of development financing, when development financing is drying up from the traditional sources. And so we have to keep that avenue open, not only for development financing, but for trade in goods and services. Because of the slowdown in China and because of the reduction in demand there, look at what has happened to most of the resource-based economies in the world. Canada, Australia, the entire Latin America. You've seen a major drop in their currency. The Canadian dollar had parity with the US dollar. Exchange rate was 1-to-1. Now I think for 70 US cents you can get a Canadian dollar. And the same thing has happened in Australia, most of Latin. Brazil has gone into deep recession and doesn't see any sign of recovery because of the slowdown in demand. So our approach to economic diplomacy may differ. But we will support all the efforts relating to borders. We separate the two. We believe that in relation to Venezuela and Suriname, but particularly Venezuela, whilst we vigorously pursue the defense of our country, wherever and whenever, that we have to keep the doors of communication open, because we're still going to be neighbors centuries from now. And we need to have good relations and to maintain in terms of functional cooperation. And so even when we had tensions in the past, we kept that line of communication open. And I said to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the President has to have that open with the President of Venezuela, that line of communication open. This is a necessity. It would help for the Petrocaribe. It would help for maybe the maintenance or the renewal of the rice contract, because we should aggressively pursue this. Too many of our farmers are going to suffer tremendously if we do not seek markets aggressively for their products now. And unfortunately, I don't see a big effort from the government to do so. An effort that can bring billions of dollars into our economy. They're still tinkering around small things and losing sight of the big picture. So we need to keep that market open. And then we have to send clear signals. So I read on one of the online news outlets that we are shifting our supply of fuel, purchasing it from Trinidad. And so I said, oh, here goes Petrocaribe, and this was attributed to a government minister. And then 3 days later, I see they're saying, no, we're still going to buy through Petrocaribe, but Trinidad is a fallback, a contradictory position. You have to be clear. Now, imagine you are in Venezuela or wherever else, and you see that the government will source all of its fuel from Trinidad and Tobago. That's the end of it. The Petrocaribe deal is done. No proceeds that could finance the trade in rice. And then a couple of days later, someone changes his mind again. It doesn't lend itself to the image of a competent government. It looks very incompetent and also uncoordinated, shooting itself in the foot, sending the wrong signals to investors and to countries. So that's the first thing in the meeting. I said at the meeting, coming back to the meeting with President Granger, I said that the other issues there on the agenda, I can tell you my position now, although my position may change depending on the discussions with the party. But since we were at the meeting, and I'm not shy to say my positions, that the government still seems to be in the campaign mode. This is what I said. And every day we open the papers, we see audits and commissions of inquiry and about who's stealing and who should be jailed and stuff like that. That this environment does not lend itself to working together in those committees. And that what maybe we should do is to allow the government another 6 months or so to go through all the inquiries that it needs to go through, to do all the investigations that it wants to do, to find all of those who have breached the law, to take whatever action is deemed necessary against those persons. And then when that period of campaign, because we believe they have to fulfill a campaign promise to prove that we're corrupt, because they made such a big issue about it, and that billions were stolen, 110 billion was stolen, and we stashed it abroad. Therefore, we're going to allow you enough time to go through all your investigation and inquiry And then when you're done with all of that and you're done taking your action, maybe that will be the time when the environment will exist for us to work on the other issues. Because how do you sit in the committee to talk social cohesion or national unity? There was one committee talk national unity. And the day before, people saying, these are a bunch of thieves. Are you going to want to unite with these thieves? Or so maybe we should allow the government to complete that. I had said in Parliament that we will support the government for all the inquiries, to go ahead with all the inquiries that it promised in its manifesto, provided these inquiries have clear terms of reference that are developed and published prior to the inquiry being started, and secondly, that they're impartial people conducting the inquiry, so that when the results come out, then they're credible results. We stated this, so we're prepared to do all of that in all of the inquiries. Further, we're prepared to support audits too. Audits of the Petro-Caribbean Fund, audits of all the state entities that they're doing, but it cannot be done in the manner that it has been done, where you put two political hacks, that I call them that, because every day, these are not professionals, these are politicians who they have put to do the audits. And they are selecting others contrary to the Audit Act. It's a breach of our Audit Act. Contrary to good governance, we believe it's a corrupt act. They just handpicked these two persons and handed them a contract that combined worth $50 million. $50 million they will pocket. Mr. Gulsaran and Christopher Ram will pocket from these audits. So the only reason, as I said before, we have not moved to the courts, because we know they're illegal, the audits are illegal, is because if we move to the courts, people may think that we have something to hide if we try to stop them. We are prepared to support any audit provided the terms of reference is clear, and I think we should hire international consultants to do the audit. Impartial consultants, big firms like Pete Marwick and not the local people, and the Deloitte and Touche and all of the others. Not these local political people. So that was in the context within which we spoke of the other items on the agenda. So I did not want to go into great details about the meeting when I spoke with the press, because I thought that it was just a courtesy meeting with us sharing initial views, since there was no agreement except in the one that I said that we will participate fully on the border committee. There was no other agreement. But in light of what I've seen by some media report, I thought it necessary to give the context of the meeting and what took place. So the president asked the others if they wanted to raise anything. And the Attorney General raised the issue about files in the AG's office. He said that he does not have the files. And Nandalal, the former Attorney General, has publicly stated more than once that all the files that are necessary for all the cases are in the office, or the institutional knowledge is there. He did not take a single document away. But so in responding basically, and maybe even before that, I said there is another issue, and that we are prepared to assist on. That we could have Anil Nandalal brief the Attorney General on all the outstanding cases that we have before the court. Let me digress for a moment. This comes back to our approach. I've made it clear that we are not going to seek to block everything or anything that comes on the agenda because the opposition puts it on the agenda. We will take a different approach from the one that they took when they had control of the parliament. They sought to block everything. The money laundering bill, the Myla hospital, the airport project, cut $90 billion from the budget. I said our approach will be, we will support things that are national. We will support things that bring benefits to our people. We will hold them to their promises that they made to the population. And we will vigorously oppose things that we think that are bad for Guyana. And so I said, we will share, coming back to the point I was making, we will share all of the institutional memory we have about those tax cases. Because we believe we don't want the government to lose those tax cases based on bad legal representation, because it will cost the Treasury billions of dollars and us as taxpayers, people of this country. So we want to share everything with them. We'll work with them on this. There are about 10 cases I pointed out at the meeting there. In just about a few cases, there are billions of dollars lying around that of liabilities to the state. And I did a rough calculation on about 7 of those cases that I know, 7 or maybe 10 of them. And the tax outstanding will be over $20-something billion that we were pursuing in court. We don't want this government to lose those cases. We do not want the government to lose those cases, because if they lose those cases, then it costs taxpayers money, and this is money that can come into the Treasury that can help to finance development. So we said we are prepared to assist to share institutional memory on all these tax cases. I pointed out a few of them. I gave a couple of examples there. So when the impression, and I think the president was misquoted, particularly in the Kaichor News, I think. He never conveyed, I read what he said, he never conveyed the impression that it was millions of lost money through corruption that I promised to assist with. He said financial advice and to recover or to get billions of dollars flowing into the coffers. And it was these cases, not money lost, ostensibly lost or stolen, as the spin has been about that. And this is why I did not want to speak much about our meeting, because these efforts falter largely because of spin that various sections of the media, based on their own, I don't know, editorial policy, put on things that happen. Because I looked at the president's statement, he never suggested that it was billions of lost money through corruption that we promised to recover. We were talking about national matters, and I believe that as a responsible opposition, we must share all of the institutional memory and the background. We believe that we could have avoided the Rudisa matter had they voted when they were in opposition with us to pass the bill. At that time, there was no liability because the court, the CCJ, had said if you pass the bill at that time, then the country would not be faced with a liability. Had they done that and taken that approach, we wouldn't have been stuck with a liability of $1.2 billion. Now, if their approach had been different. We don't want to cost the taxpayers and the treasury of this country. The PPP will never do that because this is money that is owed to the treasury, and that is why we were pursuing them through various tax matters. And it will be, I think, irresponsible of us if when we were in office we were pursuing these tax matters that deprived the treasury of billions of dollars, over $20 billion, and now we are out of office. We don't want those monies recovered anymore. So that is what we said we will assist with. Otherwise than that, the meeting was a good meeting, and it was very cordial. But in the future, I think we have to find a mechanism to ensure that what actually takes place at the meeting gets to the people in an unadulterated manner or without editorial leanings being introduced, because it will do a disservice to the people of this country and even to the talks themselves, even to the discussions themselves. Now, I was asked at the meeting further by Minister Amnali whether I will participate in the social cohesion meeting, and I declined to answer. And she kept pressing me, and the president said, no answer is an answer. And he was right, because the People's Progressive Party could not and will not take part in any effort that will undermine constitutional bodies in this country. We believe this hastily put together social cohesion conference emanated out of a promise made to a few donor countries, and it was the proverbial fig leaf. The proverbial fig leaf to cover a lot of the acts that are leading not to bringing our people together, but acts that are dividing our people further. And no amount of justification could explain why 1,972 Amerindians were fired, even if they were perceived to be members of the PPP. Are they saying that PPP people do not, these are not card-bearing members of the PPP, that they do not have any right to work? So this would qualify as discrimination based on political affiliation. But we believe it is ethnic discrimination. And to say in Parliament that we had passed a budget to pay, or a cabinet decision to pay the CSOs, CSOs, yes, because the CDOs are others. The CSOs they, up to April, was, and that we intended to fire them, was disingenuous. Because you could not, the elections were in May. You cannot pass the cabinet decision for May, especially beyond April, especially in light of the fact that we did not have a budget, because there was no budget passed. So you had to make provisions to pay them up to April. Their names were on the payroll in April. They were terminated 2 months after. They were never terminated under the PPP. Had the PPP won, they would have continued working, because a budget would have been passed and there would have been resources available. But this flimsy excuse was given because the government was caught with its pants down. And it hurriedly gave that excuse in Parliament and then offered to establish a training program to which these individuals can apply if they're eligible to apply. Nothing about restoring their jobs. It's all about semantics to create the impression they're fixing the problem. The fact remains that this is the biggest act of discrimination in the history of post-independence Guyana against a minority. 3% of the population, $720 million per annum taken away from their economy. This can't bring about social cohesion. The daily firing of people. So we hear that politicians, political people will go. And then in New York we hear, in the consulate there, the political person stays, but the technical person, the career foreign service officer, gets fired. Because why? Because he's Indo-Guyanese. But the person, the political person who headed the office stays on there. So no attempt. I saw the president saying that he could justify every case. And I'm sure that is what they told him. But if President Granger, for a moment, starts examining the reality of what is taking place now, the large numbers of people who are retiring because their workplace has become uncomfortable. And it seems as though it's people of one ethnic group, one or two ethnic groups. Their workplace has become uncomfortable. They're forced out. These are not fired, but they're forced out of the workplace outside of those that are fired. We heard pledges that politicians must not be part of the delivery of services to people. You know, we should purge the public service and these officers of the accounting officers of being politicians. And then Ramaya, who is on the list of the coalition, he becomes the REO, and Ramaya doesn't have any financial experience. He becomes the accounting officer for the region 6, the entire county, Berbice, that place, well, from the river. He becomes the accounting officer. Never dealt with financial matters before, but he now becomes the accounting officer. And I don't want to go on. I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to say that it cannot be justified, the firings. There are many cases that can be justified. If you're a politician and you were sitting in the office of the president, then it is clear that if the government changes, that you'd have to have some change in people and personnel. I understand that. But there are people out there who are scared of coming forward. Many of them are scared because of the environment. They're worried if they say anything, they're going to be discriminated against or they don't get a job elsewhere. That there's a lot of people who are now either faced with quietly being dismissed or they're resigning because the workplace is becoming uncomfortable. This doesn't allow us to participate in a sham called Social Cohesion Conference. And I said to the Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth that the international community may have unwittingly participated in an activity that would supplant a constitutional body and replace it by the executive. So what do I mean by all of this? We passed 5 rights commission in the new constitution. The Human Rights Commission, this was the constitutional reform. Ethnic Relations Commission, Commission on Indigenous People, Commission on Children, and one on gender, women, basically. The Rights Commission. The Ethnic Relations Commission has the terms of reference and mandate to forge cohesion among our people. But through promoting better understanding, through building trust, but it also has a coercive role and an investigative role. So not just a role of bringing people together. Complaints can be made there about ethnic discrimination. Complaints can be made about any matter, politicians, etc., using language that divide our people. So the Ethnic Relations Commission is a constitutional body to do this work. To sit on the commission, you have to have 2/3 support from the National Assembly. So it means bipartisan. No one side can determine who will sit there. So you're forced to work together to name these members. And the members do not come from the political class in this country. They come from the labor movement, from the private sector, from youth, from women, etc. So here what we are doing, we're replacing that by putting a ministry in place that will have tons of resources that I believe now that they will use to campaign, and they told the international community they will have outreaches. So the executive now takes over the role of the Ethnic Relations Commission. And the executive has demonstrated, this government has shown how partisan it can be. So here you have politicians becoming both implementers and judging themselves about breaches. This is a fundamental act of undermining our Constitution. And I believe that we should reject it, modify it, or something of the sort. But we will not participate in any act that undermines the Constitution of Guyana and supplant bodies that were created to bring harmony to our people to falter. You would recall the Ethnic Relations Commission visited all the regions. They have stacks of report. They investigated workplaces when there are charges that one ethnic group was dominating in a workplace. All of that came to an end. They had a period when they were very active. In 2011, the then leader of the opposition went to the court and got an injunction stopping them from working. And we only managed in 2014 to get Parliament to recommend the new list to the president at that time. Unfortunately, those people have not been sworn in. If the government is so concerned about social cohesion, swear in the members of the Ethnic Relations Commission now. You have already said that they are a constitutional agency, they can have a budget, direct budget. Resource them so they can work to bring greater. Let us be, both sides be equal participants in their work to bring greater harmony and social cohesion to people, but not replace it with a government minister who has shown over and over that she has a proclivity to be very partisan. I don't want to say too much disparaging things about people, but that is clear. Very, very partisan. So, and doesn't hide it. So that is why we did not participate and will not participate in social cohesion efforts until the environment changes. We're prepared to discuss all of these things with the government. We will probably put all of these on our agenda because the president suggested some issues, but if we are going to meet again, and we have not decided if and when, but I anticipate at some point in time you have to talk. This country needs that. And we will put all of these issues on the agenda too. The issue of crime decimating people and all of that. We'll put a lot of these things on the agenda. I just maybe wanted to say okay, maybe I just end here because I've been going on for a while. Thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner members of the Australian members of the ERC.
Yeah.
Under the former president's tenure, these members were not sworn in for months prior to the elections. Always said he would swear them in for elections. Can you explain the call now to swear them in?
Yeah. If we blundered, and I'm not saying we did, then that should not be the standard on which the new government that says it believes in governance, good governance, holds itself. That should not be the standard to which they hold themselves. Okay?
Mr. Jagdeo, Michael Young, the Ghana Times. Are you concerned, sir, about the cost of all of the commission of inquiries that are taking place and the state audits overall? You said $50 million for just the audits alone, and then
No, two individuals alone.
And we're hearing about the commission of inquiry into education and all of these other things, obviously, which will result in a high bill considering the cost that commission is at.
I have one message to the government. Get on with the business of managing our country. Get on with the business of managing our country. People out there need a clear signal where this country is going. Too many people are losing their jobs, they're losing their cars because they can't pay their loans to the bank, etc., to the banks. I spoke with tons of people. These are not supporters of the PP. They confess openly they supported the coalition. These are not people hostile to the government. And they are hurting out there, as well as the rice farmers don't know what to expect from the government. The president says you're private sector and don't expect too much help. Then, so that depressed them a bit. Then they heard budget speech and $23 billion in the budget speech for them, and they became elated. And then to discover that the $23 billion, the Minister of Finance refuses to answer where it is in the budget, and it is just passing old money, the Petro-Caribbean funds, through the budget, that it's nothing for them in the budget. And so they've gone back into depression. They don't know what's happening with the next crop. They're cutting rice at this point in time, and they don't know where they would sell it to. The sugar workers are very, very concerned. They can hear all of these things. The commission of inquiry, even before it has started, but I saw they collected some $17 million in 1 month. I read somewhere in one of the news reports. $17 million. But the first thing, even before the inquiry, the report is tendered, they said privatize. So if it is so bankrupt, who will buy it? Who will buy it? Are we shutting down sugar? And the chairman of the board has all of these views. And then we hear from the government in parliament, no, no, it will never happen. Sugar will never be privatized, or, well, they didn't say privatized. They said sugar will never be shut down. But then the Minister of Finance refuses to say where the $3.8 billion that he said he transferred to the sugar industry, because I don't know if it's true, because he's refused to say if it came from the consolidated fund. And if it did come from the consolidated fund, how did he release it when there was no budget? But he said in his budget speech, $3.8 billion was given to the sugar industry prior to the budget since they came into office. Where did the money come from? Or did it actually get to the sugar industry? We have no way of finding out. And you get all these mixed signals going to the sugar workers. In Linden, what do you say to those 90 people who lost their jobs in the call center and that are worried, the Bosai people? I remember one time when the bauxite market was soft globally and they had to lay off some workers. We started a training program for those workers. We said, you will get a small stipend if you come to learn the computer in Linden. If you come in and go to the Technical Institute and learn the computer, we will give you a small stipend. If you don't come, you're not going to get the money. Because we wanted them to be computer literate, because I felt that every Guyanese, whether you're a bauxite worker or a sugar worker or a rice farmer or anything, you should be computer literate. That kind of, you don't see the government talking about that. Go down Regent Street and find out how many people have lost their jobs. You go to the big hardware stores and see what's happening there. And it's all about crisis of confidence. When people feel the government doesn't know what it's doing, then, and it's demonstrated every day in policy that they do not, then there's a big worry. And if we think it's bad now, because what is happening now is people who have some money are holding on to that money. Because why should they spend if they anticipate bad times ahead? If housing prices, the housing market is flat, you talk to auto dealers and ask them how many vehicles they sold in the last 3 months. And ask the developers how many persons they sold land to, or any of the real estate people here in the city, and they will tell you the real situation. And if housing prices are going to drop, why would I build now? Why would I buy now? Nobody wants to buy. Nobody wants to build. Why should I spend money on buying a car now? Or if I anticipate I could lose my job next week because there's so much uncertainty about job and security. This is the mood. Fix that mood. So busy doing the inquiry into education now. I don't know how much, frankly, it will cost. It will run into tens of millions. We believe it's jobs for these boys. They bring out of the woodwork all of these people who have long made contribution to Ghana years ago, and suddenly like it's a payback, and put them up in commissions of inquiry. And I'm betting you that their reports will just sit on some shelf and would not solve any of the real problem that our people now face. You have to run the country, manage it. You have it now. And so that is my advice.
Sir, just a follow-up. Would
Yeah,
you be asking...
no, all right. Let me go on and then come back to you. Yeah, sure. Anyone else? Yeah.
You talked about the crisis of confidence continuing. What would you say, given your comments in Parliament about the economy flatlining in 2 or 3 years, about the state of the economy, one, and can you respond to the Prime Minister's offer to the PDP? He said that the government is prepared to open the doors to the party if it wants to enter an inclusive government, and he also said
I don't know about him heading any committee, but and the thing is that I saw the agenda that we gave. I saw the agenda that the president gave to me. It says National Unity Committee. Moses, I gather, has transferred that into National Unity Government. I saw a couple of news reports about National Unity Government. So conveys the impression that there's work to be done towards a national unity government. I have not seen that offer coming from the president. And the president is the head of state, and he is the head of government. And he has a substantial portfolio. I don't think Nagamootoo can make that offer. Nor do I think I think it was just done politically to appease, given the bad reception he had in WIM. And one news outfit said 500 people. Well, if it's 500, I can't count. You know, really, it was bad. And so he as usual, he talked a lot of stuff, but I would prefer to hear things from the president and from his office, because frankly speaking, I will treat them in a more credible manner than responding to the public utterances of the Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo. I think he is prone to make those utterances without any real substance to them, and I don't think in this government he is authorized to make any offer to anyone, because he can't even secure his own commitments, the commitments that were made to him through, what's the agreement again? The Cummings-Borg's Accord. So I am not responding to those issues. There is an agenda that the president proposed. We may have our own issues that we want to raise with the government. In fact, there are several of them concerning the people and wealth creation and how we make sure that people's standard of living don't slide. Those sorts of things, and the discrimination issues, those are things that we will definitely want to speak about. Right, okay. On the economy, this is my assessment, because things have, that's why I said, if you think things are bad now, things can get substantially worse in the future, because they should do a consumer confidence survey, and you should do an investors confidence survey, and you will see that if you had 10 persons that were moving ahead or plan to expand, eight of them now are saying, we're waiting and see. Let's see how things go in the future. If they don't make that investment now, there is no future growth in the economy. Without growth in the economy, and the few things that were going to be able to help with the growth, like a mile fall, if implemented, could have added about 1.5, maybe as much as 2 percentage point to GDP per annum under its construction. And until now, by the way, the Minister of Finance has not responded to the question I posed in Parliament. If we are buying power for 2.6 billion, he said, in 20 years we'll pay $2.6 billion to buy power from a miler. We believe it's 2 billion because there's a cap at $100 million a year. And after 20 years, the hydropower comes to the government for free. We'll spend $2 billion in 20 years to buy power from Amaila. How much will it cost GPL to generate the same amount of power? Our calculation has been over $5 billion. Over $5 billion. We believe that in 20 years you can save $3 billion US dollars, 600 billion Guyana dollars in 20 years, taxpayers and the Treasury saving if we buy power from Amaila versus generating the same amount of power ourselves. He has not answered that question. It's a simple question. Okay, you said it's 2.2 billion, 2.6. Even if I concede 2.6, forget the 2 billion. Let's concede his figure, 2.6. What will it take GPL to generate the same amount of power? Why don't you give it? It's a simple calculation. He would not. Would not. And then you know whether Amaila is good for Guyana or not. Then you know. And so coming back to the issue, these investments are now being made now. Lots of problems. If the banks, a lot of the banks have collateralized housing, using as collateral houses, cars, etc. If house prices start falling, and they will fall, the collateral that many of these banks hold may not be enough to cover the loans. They would have huge losses, huge provisioning. That feeds back into the economy. It feeds right back into the economy. It causes shrinkages, etc. A lot of the promises made to the gold miners, I was speaking to some of them, and they were totally disappointed with the government. They said that a lot of what they were led to believe would happen in the budget did not happen. And then Bartica, they had the mining day, and not a single person from the government showed up. Not a single person. They were very, very unhappy, these sectors. So there are lots of sectors that you have problems with. So I believe that the things are going to slide unless this government understands what it has to do. And you don't manage for ratios and change a country. It seems as though that's the new philosophy in the Ministry of Finance, manage for ratios. You have to have a growth policy. And they have proven that the budget is unclear on its goal and its long-term strategic outlook and doesn't have a set of measures and policies that will support long-term growth in the economy. It looks like just fixing little things, tinkering around the corner, trying to fulfill some campaign pledges. Yes, you. Okay, all right. Yes, Adam Harris.
The political hacks who conducting the audit, sir, prior to the elections of May 2015, they found that there were losses or over expenditure in places like the Island, the Marriott, CJIA, and even the Maurice Bridge. They're investigating these things, and would you say that their comments pre-May 2015 would be justified at the end of the day?
Well, if I say that is reason more why they should not have been given the audits. Because if you, Adam Harris, were to say, Kiteshore News is not a good newspaper today. Let me don't use that. I don't want to criticize that. Then, and then a week later, you get hired by an international consultant to assess Kiteshore News. If you say Kiteshore News is a good newspaper now, then you lose credibility because you had already committed yourself. You had publicly stated, without any investigation whatsoever, through a political process, you had said that these entities were overspending, they're corrupt, etc. So you cannot be impartial anymore. That alone, doesn't that make sense? That's why I use that example. Doesn't it make sense to this nation to see that you can't hire the same people? Because they would just come back to justify what they're saying. I saw in Parliament, they gave us a copy of Golsaran's book, some book he wrote. And I just scanned about 10 pages because it's around the budget time. I was tempted to send it back to the clerk to say, do not give me this, because it's so replete with errors and his view of what happened. If you examine when he talked about himself, the bitterness with which he hates the government, the PPP, because he believed somehow that we did not assist him in the transition to the UN and staying on at the UN. But he used another example to say the government didn't had problem with him because of the dolphin issue. He didn't, and someday maybe Dr. Luncheon will tell you the full story of why we fell out with Gulsaran. People wanting to join their service and us not agreeing to it, so for pension purposes and all of that. He will tell you. So the book in itself, in so many areas, for example, he said, oh, Amhila is so bad. Why they're funding it with so little equity? Why wouldn't the government want to get more equity into the project? Well, equity from an investor comes in now internationally. They look between 15 to 25% return on equity. That's the return for projects when you put in cash money. The loan is coming into the financing the project at 9%. That is with insurance and everything, with Sinosure insurance and the interest rates. Any person who is managing a project, you have to start with the lowest cost financing first, as you do, because you don't start with the highest cost financing. And this is why we said we wanted to buy back some of the equity at the end of the project. So if the government uses a 2% loan from the IDB to buy back equity that costs the project 18% return, then it means that you can keep the price down. That is the price of electricity. It just shows lack of understanding of basic concepts. And you know what happens is that these people, they have developed a reputation based on writings to the paper, which is not challenged. They write all of these articles, I don't know if it's economic corner or something like that, but all these economic analyses that sound very erudite, but half of them are cut and paste pieces of work. I've seen them before, cutting and pasting from other people's work and coming up with some outrageous conclusion. 300 billion lost, and then that grabs the attention of some politician and you hear it repeated elsewhere. That is how some people in this country make their reputation, not by hard analysis. And I hope that the government, when they have completed their audits, maybe we should hire an international firm to look at the quality of their audits, and this country would be appalled with their findings. So, yes, Dennis.
Mr. Jagdeo, what has been the government's response to your offer that the former AG should be faced with the present government and the tax cases? And at what cost are you calculating the barrel for oil as it relates to the price advantage over America?
I'm using the 2012 and 2013 price of oil, because that's when the numbers were run, okay? Because, so it's sensitive. At that time, the cost to generate power to us was 19 cents per kilowatt hour. It fell to about 14.5 cents now because of the price of oil coming down. But you can't make a long-term decision based on a spot price. You have to make a long-term decision on the outlook for oil. And so the international organizations, there is a projection about where oil prices will be in the future. So you tend to use that figure.
Even with shale oil coming on the street?
Yes, even with all of that, shale oil had come on the stream. And now I'm talking about now when the price is so low. So if prices go back, we're not talking about if prices go beyond 2013. If prices go beyond 2013, this country can face a collapse. We're already spending, well, at one stage, we're spending about 30% of our GDP to import fuel-related products at one stage. When the U.S. spends 5% of its gross domestic product, the Caribbean countries were spending like 30% of their GDP to import energy. Now, this is why Petrocaribbean has been so valuable to some of those countries, because it averted a crisis. And so you have to make long-term provisions for that. If we do not, and you have an upturn in oil prices, what will happen? And what is the alternative? There is no alternative. And this government says it believes in the green economy, excuse me. It believes in the green economy, and outside of that, you saw what Norway said. Norway said, you likely lose some money. So, for this. So we'd lose probably $80 million in grant that we worked very, very hard to put together. That's grant money. So all the money we were putting in would be the cost of the road and $40 million from the IDB to buy back the equity at some point in time. Because the LC, you would still have the money, you just have to set up an LC so that once GPL pays, and it's a contingent, GPL pays, they can draw down on the LC. So I just believe that everything is being done in the wrong fashion. We're not focusing on the big issues. We're not making plans for tomorrow. We're just thinking about, and when I said this obsession with bright, shiny things, so it's always about some committee. It's always about, next year we're going to set up an independence celebration committee that will celebrate, that will introspect about the future of the country. You don't need to wait till next year, August, or to introspect, or next year, May, to introspect about the future of Guyana. You need to fix problems now. Now. Yes, the one about the Attorney General, we did not speak subsequently. Because that was the last engagement. But the offer, yes, and the offer stands. The offer stands that we are prepared to transfer all the institutional knowledge we have about these cases that amount to billions, to over $20 billion.
But did the president or his officers say whether they would accept the offer?
Yeah, I think the president, I think, was very positively inclined. All right, let me just move on. You got two, yes, Pushpa, and then I come. Adam.
I just wanted to move back to the Berbice Bridge. I know that you spoke about equity as it related to Amira.
Yeah.
Under the previous administration, things like the Berbice Bridge have been heavily criticized because of the debt-based financing and not sufficient equity. I think it's 70-30, right? I just want to know what are your comments on that, and what are your suggestions, if you have any, to bring the bridge to profitability?
Well, when you hear a word, bring the bridge to profitability, and then you hear things like a cash cow for friends and family of Jagdeo won the PPP. And so let's look at the reality that when we sought, we had from the IDB loan, we had set aside $11 million to do, and we managed to get it to do a study of the crossing. The IDB did not want to go with this project because we had to find some money. So we managed to get a consultant to come in, a French company, and study 5 sites. And they came up with this as being the best site. That is why there were claims that we wanted to bypass New Amsterdam, because it is black and it supports the PNC. Had nothing to do with that, absolutely nothing. We had a study done. The reason we didn't go to Everton, it's because it would have added 25 minutes to the journey time. So you have to calculate time is money. They put a monetary value to it. The wear and tear on vehicles, and then the cost of building the road would have been another 30-something million. So the consultants determined this would be the best site. We then said, how are we going to put together the financing for this? Because it can't come all from the Treasury. The IMF was saying already the fiscal deficit. At that time, we were in an IMF program. We subsequently, in about 2006, we work our way out of the program. So they're saying the deficit is already high. You can't undertake more large projects, chunky projects, because it pushes up the fiscal deficit. They have implications. So we said public-private partnership. So we did a prospectus and we went out. And you recall that when we made a pitch to the institutional investors first to say this is a good project because it has a guarantee rate of return, that it went to NBS board, and Gaskin and some others were hired. I think even Christopher Ram at one stage. And they said it's a bad investment. Don't put your money in it. You go back to the history, just read up the papers, because I'm working from memory. But I'm sure you can look back and get the exact details on that period. So we struggled to put together the project financing. But finally we did. Now, the investors are there. We think it is a good investment until now. What has happened is that if it was a cash cow for the friends and family of the PBP, and it's not just the GPC or, I don't know, Queens Atlantic that has shares there. It's many institutional investors, NIS and the others. They have not received a single cent in dividend payments. So what they have done is they've been subsidizing the bridge. They have not received a single dollar of return from their investment in the bridge, which led Jordan in Parliament to say that it was a bad investment for NIS. Recently he said that, because he is looking at it that NIS has the money there, but has not received a return. So one hand we hear it's a cash cow for people who invested, but on the other hand, the reality is they have not received a single cent in dividend. They put in their money, 100 million, but they didn't receive a single cent so far on their investment. So they're effectively been subsidizing the bridge. But they have retained earnings. They do have retained earnings to pay the dividend. It's just that the board never paid out the dividends, in spite of the fact that they say that we were influencing them to give our friends and family. The board under the PPP never paid dividends. They had retained earnings in the company. What will happen is if they change the project economics, the retained earning and everything else will quickly disappear, so that they will not be able to pay any dividends to their investors. So the investors are arguing they're entitled to their dividends. But they argued that all along, and under PPP, Bobby Ramroop or Queens Atlantic never got a cent in dividends, never got a cent in return from the Berbice Bridge, although we hear it's a cash cow. And somehow I think this doesn't come over to people. It's hard to say that. That's why when Jordan said NIS shouldn't have invested there because it's a bad investment, if it's a bad investment for NIS, wasn't it a bad investment also for Ramroop, who didn't get a cent in return? Wasn't it a bad investment for him too? Shouldn't have put his money there? But the thing is that we hear on the other hand, oh, they milked Berbice Bridge, billions of dollars, again gone from there. That's why the bridge is in dire strait. I think you have to find a negotiated way to deal with this issue. I'm in favor of the government, of the tolls coming down everywhere. But I think you have to work with the public-private partnerships because Dominic Gaskin said in the parliament he wants public-private partnerships. We have one at Ogle. We got money. Why don't they speak about that? The Ogle airport, we got a grant from the European Union, which is money to the government, basically, through the regional indicative program, to lengthen the runway. So that's basically public funds invested there too. Now, it is being privately managed, and they get a return on their investment. But that is, again, a public-private partnership. Maybe we should examine that too. There are lots of these things that sometimes in the politics of all of this and the rhetoric, people lose sight of the reality of putting projects together and how hard it is sometimes. And that is what is absent in this government. A lot of the people, the ministers, they're still in that mode. They're very good at saying what's wrong. But they, at some stage in their lives, they'd have to start putting things together, start creating projects and put them together in a fashion that makes financial sense. And I don't think they're capable of doing this. So they're prepared to stay in that mode all the time.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
When the bridge was first proposed, the World Bank, I'm going to totally be one of those persons that quotes from Holland, from economists. Mr. Taran Kamaraj will talk about tomorrow in his column in Star Review. He will talk about the World Bank proposed a $40 million, something that was far less than $40 million for synchronized ferry service across the bridge. Why was that not considered?
We never worked with the World Bank. I'm telling you about the IDB loan. I don't know if the World Bank doesn't propose. The government of Guyana, the way I know it, has always been the one that will determine the programming of our money. And so I believe that we had to have a bridge. Everyone, I think the consensus across the country has been that we should bridge the Berbice River. It does a number of things outside of the obvious benefit of more ease of transport, but it's integrating the territory of the country. It has impact on trade, on the movement of goods and services. It does something for the country that's unbelievable outside of ferry service. And so we made a decision that the promise that was made in the 1960s to bridge the Berbice River will be done. And I'm glad I saw someone did a comparison of what they had to pay when they crossed the ferry. $1,500 for the vehicle, $120 per passenger. So when you add just what they had to pay for the vehicle and the passenger, and the old ferry, it's more than they now pay for the crossing of the bridge. What they had to pay, I don't know, I saw a letter somewhere and to that effect. It is unbelievable. Do you have a service now that comes in around the same rate you would have paid at the ferry. Only thing is that you don't have to wait for hours. And he was talking about the wait time and the food he had to buy, and he calculate all that. But I don't think you need to calculate the food, but the waiting time. I know people waited 8 hours there. Trucks and all of these things, you know the nightmare it was. We don't cost time. And so World Bank, I'm not going to allow, or never allowed, a technician to come from World Bank who sat in Washington, and some of them don't even know to spell Guyana, to come here and determine our future. And that's why we have to be careful how we allow foreign representatives to talk all the time and give instructions to our government. I see that now seems to be in the mode, that foreign representatives from wherever seem to be instructing our government on what to do on a daily basis, and they comply. I'm opposed to that. I'm not stuck in the Taron Kemraj, the ratio economist type of mode. I'm not stuck in these ratio type of economist mode. All they're pouring over an econometric analysis and writing things that don't mean any sense whatsoever, because half of them don't have any relevance here, and half are cut and paste. I've read their works that they've done, because I check our opponents.
No, if I skip,
You skip? All right, yes.
A follow-up. You said that in the early stages, Christopher Ram had advised that it's a bad investment. And
Yeah, I think I said he may have, but I know Gaskin.
so are you saying now that it's come to reality that maybe his probable opinion is that it was indeed a bad investment?
I think it's a brilliant investment. I think it's good. We marketed it as a good investment. We marketed it as a good investment because what it does, because the policy of the board was not to declare dividends. So the company retain earnings. They can, I think, at their structure, if you keep the same rate structure and you have a growth in traffic, then what will happen is that the bridge can give the investor a good return on their capital as well as provide the service. We have to grow the traffic, the use of the bridge. We have to grow that. So we have, and that will grow. Well, now it may not grow. People might not travel so much now.
Also, are you
So I think it's I think public-private partnership are brilliant things. It's just that what I was saying, that over and over you see from the same Kaichor news how this bridge is a milking cash cow for friends and family of the PPP, and they use Dr. Ramroop, that the investments did not yield a single cent of revenue, dividend to those people. So I hope that you revise that to say it. I believe it's a good investment. I believe it's a good investment. And I think more and more we should do this, create opportunities for our people. I would like to see, say, the Marriott. Why not sell shares in the Marriott to all Guyanese? Because I think it's brilliant. We can own it. And I think you can get, probably if you sell the shares, you may get more than the 8 million in equity that you need, or the 12 million in equity that you need to raise to take 100% ownership. I think we have to provide more development type activities where they get a 10%, 20% return on their money rather than 3% in the bank. We have to create those opportunities for more and more people in the country so their money doesn't remain in the bank. It starts getting utilized in the economy, and they will want to invest in those things. That is what we have to do. If you look at our manifesto, we said that we want to improve the intermediation of capital and expand the range of capital the opportunities, economic opportunities in the financial sector available to people. It was that kind of thinking When you settle the country now, you can move to higher levels of financial sophistication. You can move to that because we are consolidated now. We can go there.
So also,
Yes, let me give this. You asked one, so I gave you two.
Follow up to that same one.
All right, once
You
you.
said you're in favor of tolls coming down all over, including at the Burmese Bridge. So, do you think that BBCI call for an increase? It's an unreasonable call, and would you now? You said that they can make money if the passage is the use of the bridge is increased. So, would you more try to suggest them hoping to get the increase of passage than an increase in toll?
I am not in the government now. I know. So
But
a lot of these,
government,
yes, a lot of these issues have to be dealt with the government, and I believe that they can find a good resolution to all of these issues. They can find a good resolution to a lot of these issues if they sit and work with everyone involved.
utilize the government with that capacity?
Well, no, I said they can. I'm not saying they're capable of doing it. That's too different. They can. The can means there is a possibility, an opportunity there. Whether they can grasp it, and that's a different matter.
Sir, are you likely to be the subject of an investigation by the very auditors? Because when they question your acquisition of the Bradford veterinary, they also question your ability to set up that nice little duplex and all of that on your earnings.
With duplex.
They also
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, yes. So the thing is that if Christopher Ram and Golsaran, my affairs are public book. Actually, further, I said to Gordon Mosley. I don't know if he put it on in Parliament. I said to the president at the meeting that since there have been lots of charges about people stashing money abroad, that some of the things that in the short term, since you're in this transparency mode, that we can work on is, first of all, why don't we get all of our members of parliament to make public, not to send just to the Integrity Commission, but to make public their financial assets, not just financial, but assets held outside of Guyana. Because there have been some claim that it's difficult to access that. They can find things in Guyana, but they have a hard time tracking things around the world. So why don't we do this? I'm prepared to work with the government to do that. And let's put a huge penalty for those who lie or don't submit their lie about this or refuse to submit their information. And we should table this not to the Integrity Commission, but let's pass a law and deposit all of these affidavits or whatever we call them in the National Assembly so any member of the public can go in and check what assets we hold abroad. I'm prepared to do that, to work with them on something of that. I'm also prepared to work with them on declaring that every member of parliament must declare for the past 10 years, or make public, not declare, make public in a similar fashion their payment of taxes. The last 10 years. So they make public to anybody can walk off the road and check this out. I'm prepared to subject myself to any of these things. In fact, I'm advocating it. So I'm now worried about a Christopher Ram and Anand Golsaran. The audit discovered that I'm living in Pradoville. And the audit discovered how much I paid for the land. I see a big revelation about this. You know, the audit discovered Jagdeo living there. I saw some big things. I've been living there for 4 years. I don't think you can have much more written about the everything and any more accusations that leveled against me than Kaichor News has already leveled.
So you're saying
Right.
to bring out everything as long as it's across the board?
No, it's across the board. We should do it. This is transparency. I am prepared to subject myself to all of this, but let's do it so that every member of parliament across the board, let's do it across the board. And so that is it. But by the way, yes, coming back to this, do you think this country thinks that there's anything more that Kaichor News could say about me that hasn't been said in relation to transparency? So, but I'm not worried about it. In fact, I think they're not very happy. Let me don't go that route. Let me don't go that. Yeah. Let me don't go that route. All right, let's go. Yes. Let me go back to anyone who has not. Yeah. No. But anyone who has not asked me a question before who wants to ask. If not, I go to Dennis. Yeah.
Mr. Jagdeo, why should Guyanese take you seriously about not wanting media policy when during your term of office you banned Bharrat Jagdeo, as restricted or banned from the Standard News? There were other allegations against in terms of media suppression and so on. Why should we take you seriously now with your policy?
You're actually right that there were several allegations. There were several allegations. There have been lots and lots of allegations against me. And if I had to answer all the allegations, I'd waste my entire life. But I never told you the truth about why Gordon Mosley was asked not to come back to the office of the president or State House. And it had nothing to do with media. Absolutely nothing to do with media. It had nothing to do with media. And maybe I don't want to go back there. But right, I don't want to go back there because
But you're preaching transparency.
No. I'm preaching transparency, but on this matter, I prefer to let it die. So, no, but you raised it. He raised it, and so you raised it. So I prefer, just like how there are lots of things in the security sector that I will not say now because although I'm in opposition, I don't want to compromise the security sector about things that I know, like capabilities that we have, that I was briefed about as president. I'm not going to say that. There are things that sometimes you just have to do that. So that was it.
But most days with security asset.
No. It is not personal. It is not personal. It is a principle, a position of principle. And I leave it at that. It's not personal. So now, no. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that. Then what was the other? Oh, the Starbuck News. Yeah, Starbuck News. We moved the ads to Kaichor News based on claims that they had the biggest circulation. Starbuck News said it had. Yeah, and then I was criticized by the same Kaichor News for moving it too. You know, so it was bad media. I never support, and I will never support any attempt by the government to regulate media, because even when I disagree, I said this before, even when I disagree vehemently with the content that some of the media houses put out. And so I will never support any attempt. There was never in my tenure as president or under the PPP that I know of any policy outside of like the broadcast legislation and those things that attempted to deal with media. And in the context of how it developed, remember the context of how this matter came up. It came up because the Chronicle reporter pushed a headline that the government blunder, and they did blunder in Parliament. They presented a budget that was illegal, basically. It did not. It was not in compliance with the Constitutional Amendment Act, the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, and I dare say the Fiscal Transfers Act. So they did blunder, and we worked with them to fix it. And the Prime Minister chastising the reporter, he claimed otherwise. It was in that context that the question was asked of Mr. Harmon because of that issue, and he said there is a media policy coming. So we don't believe the context is very important. He could have only referred to say that in the context within which the question was asked, by implying that there was some policy to determine content of what people wrote. Content. And so I can never support any policy to regulate content. I can say that, media houses maybe what should keep good financial accounts. That's different. But any attempt to regulate content, and this was the context. That is, you can't miss that point about how the matter emerged and the context within which the question was asked. We'll never do that. Any attempt to regulate.
In retrospect, Mr. Jagdeo, do you think...
Oh, no, I'm done, yeah.
Do you think that their policy of calling us Karen Cruz was a way of tackling the...
But don't ask me if I change that view, because I don't want to get there anymore. I think it's a bait that I'm not going to take at this point in time. I decline to answer that question. The General Secretary needs to do that more often, decline to answer some questions.
Okay, are you taking questions on the parliamentary agenda for tomorrow?
Oh, yes, by the way, Mr. Mahmoud Shah and Arun Mangar have resigned from the Guyana Elections Commission. I wish to publicly thank them on behalf of the People's Progressive Party for the enormous labor they put in there at GCOM in very difficult circumstances to represent the interests of people of Guyana. I have also written the President pointing out that I had consulted with the parliamentary party that is in opposition in Parliament, and it's that is the PPP, and they have submitted 2 names to replace these individuals. Those names are Robeson Ben and Bibi Shadiq. And I've urged the President to graciously, quickly swear them in the face of upcoming local government elections, so that the Elections Commission can be fully comprised. Yes, no. I'm not done. I'm just drinking a bit of coffee. We're very unhappy with this obscene trend that we have seen in Parliament. It runs counter to a lot of what the government has been saying about reaching out and good governance and wanting to make Parliament work. So we saw earlier in the week the government nominating to the 4 standing committees of Parliament, the Committee on Social Affairs, Economic Affairs, Natural Resources, and Foreign Affairs. For the first time ever, ministers. There was this understanding, we never had a minister on any of these committees because ministers and their policies were supposed to be reviewed by these committees. So they have departed once again from the tradition, and they have nominated ministers there. We know earlier how they departed from the tradition. They tried to limit my time in Parliament when traditionally the leader of the opposition will speak without any limitation, and he would be the penultimate speaker in the budget debates. They've also put a minister on the Public Accounts Committee, which is again a departure from tradition. Every single day, we have a creeping style, a style which is in public statements that sound very lofty and quiet surreptitiously in a sinister fashion, a creep against taking our rights, infringing on democracy. And so again, they have a oversight committee on the security sector. A minister is supposed to chair that committee. In fact, the government always chairs this committee. I notice Mr. Ramjatan is not on it, but Mr. Felix is on it. So Felix now, normally the Minister of Home Affairs will chair that sector, the oversight committee on the security sector. So it begs the question, who is really in charge of the security sector? We are going to debate the Local Authorities Elections Act tomorrow. And we are very surprised about how it was rushed through on Friday. We are told that we will receive notice about this, a session on Wednesday in Parliament, when most people thought that, although the recess formally starts on the 10th of September, that it was over, there would be no rushing of bills through the Parliament. On Monday, a lot of our people received a bill yesterday, and a perusal of the bill, so we're very unhappy about the rush fashion again. Something that they always were opposed to when they were in opposition. They always argued that things should go to a select committee. So this rush fashion with which we are presented the bill. When we looked at the bill, there are 26 amendments, and it seems as though some of the amendments did not originate in GCOM, but in the minister's office, and that some of the amendments were altered by the minister's office. So when GCOM says 40 days, nominate before elections, there be nomination day, it is now gone to 50 days. When for national elections, it was 32. But that's just one issue. So we do have major concerns about various elements of the bill. It seems as though, with the timelines proposed in the bill, that we may not have local government elections before year end. And I don't know if this is deliberate. We in the PPP, we are ready to contest the local government elections. We are ready. And so we are not going to try to block any passage of any legislation. But at the same time, we will not support anything that is inimical to transparency and the interests of people and the conduct of clean, fair local government elections. So, and you know our position already on the machinery called GCOM itself. So we will be looking forward to being told, and I hope the media addresses some of these issues too, that they, about the clear demarcation of both external and internal boundaries, and that this will be communicated to the public very early about the boundaries for the constituencies, both external and internal boundaries. Secondly, GCOM has to assure us that people are transferred into their right division or subdivision or constituencies. Why does this matter? At the national level, if when we had the we have the overall system is PR. So if you're voting in Berbice, but you now live in, your name is in Berbice, but you live in Diamond, and you didn't transfer, then you go up to Berbice to vote, that's fine. But when you have constituencies, because your vote will still be counted, and it does not alter the results of the election, because you get the seats based on the share of the popular vote that you win. But when it's constituency based, assuming that people are not transferred into their right constituencies, then they can easily sway the results in a marginal area. They can change results in marginal areas. So we have to be very, very careful that GCOM has to now assure us that people who had not transferred in the past are now transferred and are in their right constituencies. And then also that the list is clean of dead people, etc. So there are lots of things that need to happen. The nation needs the assurance and for us to have good elections. We believe that we have to start now to argue for enhanced biometrics. So, and for a clean list, and for electronic, a dual system of voting, both electronic and with the ballot. With the ballot, so because they're dual systems of voting, so you can count, if you have concerns about here, you can count the votes also in the ballot box. We need to have greater transparency around the discipline services vote too. And remember when the discipline services voted in the past, and they will take the votes and place it in a particular box or a polling station to be counted. It didn't matter at that time because you can get 150% of the people in that area, or the numbers of people on the voter list there, 150% more because of the discipline services vote. But if they don't transfer the votes in the right constituency now, you can alter again the results of some marginal constituencies. So assuming the difference between, say, two parties is 10,000 votes in, or 5,000, or no, say 100 votes in two constituencies, and you bring in discipline services vote. So we believe the bill is making provisions for that. But all of these things have to be discussed and clarity given before we rush through any passage of legislation. So we have some huge concerns about the bill. And it is not to delay local government elections, but to ensure that we have transparently held elections.
Dr. Jag, you said two commissioners resigned. Can you see even what were the reasons for resignations? I'm asking a question in the context of
Personal reasons.
PP said that two persons, they're going to change the person at chief government.
They resigned for personal reasons. Yeah, personal
They
reasons.
weren't pressured to resign.
No, they're personal reasons. You can ask them, but for personal reasons, I think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo?
I tend to go long. I start.